The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Matthew. When Jesus came into the district of Caesarea Philippi, he asked his disciples, "Who do men say that the Son of Man is?" And they said, "Some say John the Baptist, others say Elijah, and others Jeremiah, or one of the prophets." He said to them, "But who do you say that I am?" Simon Peter replied, "You are the Christ, the Son of the living God." And Jesus answered him, "Blessed are you, Simon Bar-Jonah, for flesh and blood has not revealed this to you, but my Father who is in heaven. And I tell you, you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of Hades shall never prevail against it. I will give you the keys of the kingdom of heaven, and whatever you bind on earth will be considered bound in heaven. Whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven." The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
So today is a very ancient feast in the church. You might think it's strange, or people outside the church might think it's strange to have a feast of a chair. But it's really got nothing to do with furniture. In fact, there were two feasts. The chair of St. Peter in Antioch, because he was quite a famous bishop in Antioch as well, before coming to Rome. But in Rome, the feast in Rome predominated. Now, recently we had the story of what happened at Caesarea Philippi in the very north of Israel in the Gospel of Mark. And that was a pared down version, Mark being very economical with his language. But in Matthew's version, which we've just heard, the emphasis is also on Peter. Obviously, the great revelation and statement was the messiahship of Jesus, that he was indeed the Messiah, the Son of the living God. But in Matthew's account, there is also this emphasis on Peter. Because when Peter made his act of faith, inspired by God directly, Jesus took the opportunity to prophesy about Peter himself. And he used three images stand out in this Gospel of Matthew about Peter: rock, keys, and shepherd. A lot of people speculate that Peter's nickname was Rocky. And he had this nickname anyway because of the connection. Well, I don't know why, because of his personality perhaps. But when Jesus changed his name to Peter, he did so directly on this name, which symbolized strength and determination and firmness. And we know from Paul's reflections that Jesus himself is the rock, the real foundation. And that Jesus shares that foundational charism with Peter and his successors. And so the church is built on a rock, solid. However, all imagery limps, and the church is also often described as a boat on a stormy sea, unstable, So it goes through these different moments. But what endures, what is permanent, is guaranteed by the Spirit of the living God. And so we give thanks today, not for the particular chair, the chair being a symbol of authority and power and teaching, because in those days to teach, you sat down in the teacher's chair. Jesus also uses the imagery of keys. And this, for the symbolism of this, you need to remember Isaiah and the incident with Shebna, who the prophet told would lose his power and his authority and would be replaced by Eliakim as the chief priest. Eliakim, who will open and no one will shut, and when he shuts, no one will open. So the keys symbolize the authority and power given by Jesus to Peter and to his successors. A rock and keys, but most of all, and the dominant imagery for caring for the flock, for leading the flock, is the idea of the shepherd. The Old Testament is full of imagery of God the Father as the great shepherd. Jesus himself identifies himself as the good shepherd. And he shares this with his apostles, disciples, and with all of us who have to be shepherds one to another. And so it is important that we celebrate this gift of leadership in the church, especially because throughout the history of the church there have been divisions, fragmentation. The core truth and the core reality endures. But the primacy that really matters is the primacy of love. And I remember on many visits to the Holy Land going to Tabqa, where Jesus made breakfast after the resurrection for his disciples, and where Peter made his confession of love to make up for his denials. And on the little altar where pilgrims are invited to celebrate their Eucharist, there is an inscription about the primacy of love, the primacy of service, the primacy of care for God's people. And so today I think we must pray for the church, starting with our Holy Father Francis, current successor of Peter, but for the whole church as it goes into uncharted waters with the development and the synod on synodality. But also I think we need to pray for the church in the Ukraine. We as Redemptorists are particularly concerned because we have a substantial presence in the Ukraine, many confreres. But the church is basically divided in the Ukraine between Orthodox and Christian. So even there, they feel the division and the fraying and unraveling of the church. And so we must pray for the unity of the church in that country in its current crisis, but throughout the world, that we may be faithful to the gift given to us, and that we ourselves may share the care for others all around us. Saint Peter, pray for us.